Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about domain and range. So let's start with some vocabulary. Domain is the set of all x values in a function. Range is the set of all y values in a function. So let's talk about something called set builder. So just as a reminder, set builder notation looks something along these lines, where we have our curly brackets, a variable such that that variable equals a number. Right? And we're going to kind of add on to this and tweak it a little bit to make it match what we need for domain and range. All right, so let's look at notation for domain and range. So what does it mean when where are we looking when we want to find the domain and range of each of these different types of relations? So in a mapping, our domain is always the starting bubble. The range is always our ending bubble or group. In an ordered pair, the domain is all of our x coordinates and our range is all of our y coordinates. When we're looking at a table, our domain is the independent variable, which is also generally our x values, and our range is the dependent variable, or our y values. And then when we look at graphs, again, we're looking at x values for the domain and y values for the range. All right, so let's take a look at an example here. Here we have a relation that is a set of ordered pairs. We want to identify the domain and range from this set. Now, a couple of key things that we need to make sure we keep track of. When we write things in domain or when we write out our domain and range, it's a set. So we always have to put a set inside curly brackets. And then when we list out our numbers for our domain and for our range, we always list them in order from least to greatest, and we cannot repeat any numbers. So when I look at my x values, I have a 9, a 4, a 7, and a -5. When I list them out, I'm going to put them, though, in numerical order. So I'm going to start with my -5 and work my way up to the 9. I'm going to do the same thing for the range. I have a -1, a 5, a 6, and a 5. You're going to notice that that 5 repeats itself. I'm only going to list it once. So I end up with a -1, a 5, and a 6. So when we show our numbers for domain and range, if a number occurs more than once, we only have to write it down one time. All right, I want you to come down here and try this one on your own. Give me the domain and the range of this relation. Go ahead, pause your video now. All right, let's go to the next page. This time we're going to look at a table. We're going to identify the domain and the range from the table. So here we have our time, and here we have our distance. So this is time is my independent variable, distance is my dependent variable. My first column is also always my x values. My second column is always my y values. All right, so my domain is going to be this first column, a 0, a 2, and a 4. I need to remember to put it inside the curly brackets, list them in order from least to greatest, and have no repeats. And then do the same thing for the range. It needs to follow those three things. Curly brackets, list in order from least to greatest, and no repeats. All right. Now this time we have a table that's a horizontal table. Right? Same thing. So I want you to go ahead and list your domain and range. Make sure that you use your curly brackets, that you list them in order from least to greatest, and that you have no repeats. Go ahead, pause the video now. Okay, let's take a look at example 3. Here we have a mapping, and if you haven't seen one before, the beginning description might have been a little confusing. So here's our first bubble, which is always going to be our x values. Here's our second bubble, our y values. And what this does is it literally maps our x values to its paired up y value. So the ordered pairs I could pull out of this would be a 3 and a 4, a -1 and a 4 and a -2, a 6 and a -2, and a -7 and a 4. All right, so we're going to list our domain, which again is all of our x values. It's going to be in brackets, and we're going to order them in least to greatest order and have no repeats. So it will look like this. When we go to our range, we can see that this 4 actually gets used 3 times. It's paired up with the 3, it's paired up with the -1, it's paired up with the -7. And we see that the -2 gets used twice. It also shows up in 2 different ordered pairs, 4, -2 and 6, -2. But remember, one of the things that we have to remember when we're writing out our domain and range is that we cannot write out the repeats. So I'm going to write them in side brackets in order from least to greatest. And I'm not going to show the repeated values. I'm only going to write down each one time. So the only 2 numbers that occur in my range are -2 and 4. Okay, let's go to the next page. And I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. Go ahead and pause your video now. All right, let's take a look at the graphs. So now we can go ahead and identify the domain and range from the graph. So again, our domain is our x values. So if I look at each of my points, I'm going to look to see where do they line up on the x-axis. So I can do this with each one. So if I have this point here, what is its x value? It's a -3. This point here lines up with -1. This point lines up with, even though I can't really get my arrow drawn very well, 0. This one lines up with 1. This one lines up with 2. And this one's actually in between 2 and 3. So between 2 and 3 like that is about a 2.5. I'm just going to kind of try and center these a little bit better. All right, so now when we go to write our domain, I've got a -3. Well, and the nice thing about this is when I look at it this way, they're already in order for me. I'm only going to write down the ones, though, that my points are line up with. So I've got a -3, a -1, a 0, 1, 2, and then 2.5, because it's about halfway between the 2 and the 3. So again, curly brackets, in order least to greatest. All right, now when I go to look at my y values, or my range, this time I'm going to start with my bottom, my lowest point, because it's all going to be compared to the y-axis. So this one here has a -2. This one lines up with -1. This one is just on the 0, so I can't really draw an arrow for that one. This one is at 3, and so is this one. These ones are both at 3, and then this one's at 5. So get that off the 3 a little bit. All right, so now we can go ahead and we can start at the bottom because that's where my smallest y value is. So I have a -2, a -1, the 0, the 3, although it happens twice, and then the 5. So once again, I'm going to write this in order, least to greatest, and I'm going to put it inside my curly brackets, and I'm not going to show any repeats. So even though we point at the 3 twice, I'm only going to write it down once. And this one here, oh, and I guess I didn't really talk about this one too much. This is at about a 0.5. It's between the 0 and the 1. So there's our 0.5. Okay, I'd like you to try this one on your own. Go ahead, pause your video now. And that concludes our video for today. I will see you in class next time.